Hello and welcome to Unpolitical Politics with Cousin Nikki. Today I had the distinct honor of interviewing Miss Brandy Williams of the Hip Hop Caucus. A little bit about Miss Williams is Brandy B. Williams serves as the national organizer for the Hip Hop Caucus. She is an award-winning accredited public relations professional turned broker for change who uses her diverse public relations background to negotiate opportunities, equality, equity, and liberation for Black people. Recently, Brandy received her certification as a health coach and launched Soul Med, a holistic health collaborative for Black women. As a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and trauma, domestic violence, anxiety, and depression, she believes health is a radical act of social justice that can help change the trajectory of outcomes for Black people. Thank you, Brandy, for coming. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to start the show in about 1 minute. And when we come back, everybody, we're going to hear from Ms. Brandy Williams. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is Unpolitical Politics on YouTube. Make sure to follow and like the Facebook page, UPP Cousin Nikki. Make sure to go to the IG page, which is Unpolitical Politics. And we will see you in 1 minute.
Hosted by Cousin Niki. It's the king of the zoo. Young Ward, yeah. Like, comment, subscribe. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy. You know the vibes, ayy. You know the vibes, ayy. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy. Like, comment, subscribe, ayy.
Welcome back, and we are here with Ms. Brandy Williams. What did I miss on your impressive resume?
I'm not sure. I think the biggest thing I really want people to understand is that my desire, my goal, my purpose has always been here to serve and help Black people. Right. So everything that I do from my PR career to now the transition into health coaching and active community organizing has always been about making sure things are better for our people. So regardless of the accolades and like, I don't get into awards or titles or anything like that. For me, at the end of the day, I just want people to remember and that I was here and served to help advance our community, and also know that they can come to me while I'm still here and find out what's going on, and I'll help you kind of get wherever you need to be. So for me, that's what it's all about.
PR relations to activists. Walk me through what led you to your transition. Walk me through what led you to be a PR exec and what the transition was to where you are now.
So I started thinking about a career in PR without knowing what it was called in high school. I wanted to, my heart has always been to give back, and I enjoyed sports. So I wanted to work with athletes to help them with their foundations and do community work. So that's how I got into PR. So there was always a service and community focus of that work. And I spent most of my career working in government and nonprofit. So it was always helping the community. And in doing that, that's when I got connected to the Hip Hop Caucus. I connected with them in 2010 and have been been connected with them since. And so it's always for me been about organizing, been about giving back. So it wasn't really much of a transition. It was just how I was doing it, the methodology with which I was able to do that.
And with the Hip Hop Caucus, while working with Hip Hop Caucus, you also transitioned to Soul Med. And what led to that?
So actually, my anxiety and depression, I suffer from both. I survive them every day. And so just, I heard God telling me years ago that I needed to work with Black women. And I'm like, yeah, no, I only want to do that. But I didn't really know then fully what that looked like. And he had to take me through some traumatic experiences to get me to a place where I pulled myself out of the depths. And since, this is Suicide Prevention Month, I want to tell people, like, I've been there. Like, I literally tried to commit suicide, like took the pills, had to go to the hospital to get my stomach pumped, like all of that. It was, through those things and those experiences that I got to the place where I said, I want to help again, that the service heart. And then I got diagnosed with pre-diabetes, and I'd always been extremely healthy, never had any health issues. So for me, it was just a matter of, again, using a different way to be able to serve and help our people.
First of all, I applaud you for overcoming the things that you have overcame. So, in a nutshell, who is Brandy Williams?
I am a soon-to-be 45-year-old mother of 2 college students who is passionate about change, and seeing change happen for people that look like me, and for low-income families and Black and brown communities.
So, as we move on in this conversation, what is Hip Hop Caucus?
So the Hip Hop Caucus is a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that provides those 18 to 40 in the hip hop culture the opportunity to connect to politics. So we use culture as the base for how we connect to politics, or how we connect people to politics.
What role does hip hop play in politics? Take me back, because I was talking to someone before about rap, and when rap first began, it began with the message, and you were talking about the conditions of the areas where we live, our community, what was going on. Then it kind of transitioned to, we saw the more Black power, Black empowerment with NWA. You had Africa Bambaataa, you had Boogie Down Productions. I even, was talking about the Stop the Violence movement with someone when they did Self-Destruction. Those songs in that era really told a political story. So it made sense to really get into politics then, because you heard, the message. What role, as of now, we fast forward almost 40 years since hip hop has come on the scene, since rap has come on the scene, what role now does hip hop play in politics?
So I say it still plays the same role, right? And so there are going to be different ways that you see that experience. And so this is all about the culture. So the art, the fashion, and the music. So it's all of those things together that make the culture. And I think if we just use last year's election as an example, You saw a lot of, people actually, T.I., Killer Mike.
Yes.
You had strippers from Booties to the Poles in Atlanta getting involved. And, that's a huge part of Atlanta culture is, strip club culture. And, you want to break a record, you go to the strip club in Atlanta. So all of those things are part of our culture. And I think that you're starting to see us actually get more involved. I think too, social media has helped that, right? So I remember when I first heard about Trayvon Martin, it was on Facebook from one of my friend's sons, and she's actually friends with Trayvon's mom. Like they worked together in Miami back in the day. And so that was one of the first ways that you started to see hip hop, our people kind of passing the message and helping. So hip hop continues to play that same role of messaging. When we were before the show, you were asking, and I'm probably gonna this is going to come earlier in the conversation, but I think it's a good fit for right now. When we talk about songs that motivate me and that make me think about politics, the interlude on Outkast's first album, True That with Goody Mob, operating under the crooked American system too long, Outkast, pronounced Outcast, adjective meaning homeless or unaccepted in society. But let's look deeper. And so you talked about, disease engineering and all the things that are happening in our world. Again, it's still there. The message is still there, even in a lot of the songs when we hear about oppression. I think back to this was 2014, 2013, Kurt Cobain, and how, I just want to be rich, and he talks about why he wanted to be rich and what it felt like to have money and then not have it, and people being there. And those all express the struggles that we go through. So I think hip hop continues to play a role. And I think even more so now, we're showing up in different ways. So now, like my t-shirt, I can't really see it, but it says Deltas for Justice, right? So my sorority, we're getting involved. Like we're walking around, we're walking billboards for what we believe in. We Black Lives Matter t-shirts. So our culture is continuing to show up and play a part in how we think about politics. The one area that I do think that we need to do better in is helping us really access the information, right? So having conversations in our language about what's actually happening. We need to start doing that a lot more, not just talking about the struggles, but also explaining to people about redistricting, how to get involved, why that's important with what's happening. I don't know how many people really understand what's going on with voting rights across the country. And so how do we actually get those stories out there to tell people and guide them on how they can create activists and movements in their local communities?
Well, I'm happy to report that here in Virginia, we are the first Southern state to have a Voting Rights Act, which was written by two Black legislators, Senator Jennifer McKellen and Delegate Marcia Price, and they brought to life the Voting Rights Act of Virginia. So I'm proud that that's like a praise report for us to be the first Southern state to do so. So I'm glad that you brought up the voting rights, because now we're seeing in Texas and in Florida and a few other places that they're trying to stop the vote, so to speak. There's a lot of voter suppression, even in Georgia. Talk to us about voter suppression and what it means to be suppressed at the voting polls.
So let's start with the last part of that question. What it means to be suppressed at the voter polls means, there's so many different things that can happen. So for communities of color, early voting, it was an amazing opportunity for us, right? Because on voting day, it was very difficult if you're working 2 or 3 jobs or you have kids and you're on the bus or whatever, that you can get to the polls on that day. So what they did with early voting, it expanded access to the ballot. It gave you more time to actually go vote. You can vote, depending on the state and how your state is set up. So I'm in North Carolina. We can, in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County specifically, because voting is done by county, right? So the rules are set up by the local election boards. And so what you're seeing is And so that means that there are a lot of different things happening. So in Mecklenburg County, doing early voting from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on any day, go to any polling place and you can vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as they started to suppress votes, what they did is they limited the number of this last election of early voting locations that you had. So there wasn't as many places that I could go, so it wasn't as convenient. But I still had the option to go. And then during this last election too, because of COVID, so many people did absentee ballots. And so now what you see, because we showed up, we showed out at the polls in 2020, we have this huge movement that started literally right after November, with states. It was at least 400 bills introduced in 49 states since
Mm.
the last election to suppress the vote. And that could look like anything from, like I just said, decreasing the amount of hours of early voting, decreasing early voting locations, saying like in Georgia that they can't give water to people who are standing in long lines. You have to be the person to take your ballot to your absentee ballot to the local board of elections. And so when you think about people that live on reservations and some and like in Arizona, particularly where this was happening, that means that the reservation is far. They usually have somebody bring all the applications to them. They fill them all
Okay.
out. They take them all back. And so now that's in jeopardy, right? And the same thing, like you just talked about with Texas, we can see, Senate Bill 1 looks like it's about to go through, and there's several things in that bill. So no drive-through voting. Drive-through voting is another way to increase access to the ballot. So if I'm disabled or whatever, I don't have to get out. I don't have to try to find a parking space. I just go through and drive through and vote. They used to have 24-hour voting. And so they stopped that. They reduced that back to 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then it becomes a felony for any board of election to actually send unsolicited mail-in ballot applications to people. And so they did that a lot too, because that, people would get in the mail like, oh, I can just do this and vote and turn it back in. I don't have to actually go to the polls. And so all of those were ways for us to increase access to the ballot, and that's now being jeopardized. There are actually 18 states that have passed 30 different voter restriction laws so far. And
Wow.
so again, we're still seeing them kind of pushing through. And the new way, another way that they do it is through redistricting. So one of the reasons that the census is so important and us making sure that we show up in the census is because that's how they determine a lot of things, including how many representatives you get in the U.S. House of Representatives. And so in North Carolina, because we gained population, we gained a seat. California, I believe, lost a seat. Right, there can never be more than 435 seats. So basically, we were just trading seats depending on where the people go. Right, so if you got more people, you need more representation. You lose people, you lose representation. But that means that we got to redo the districts. So that means that I have to now draw a map that says this is the district and these are the people living in this district who are going to be represented by this person. And so what that means, and what you see a lot of times, is people that when they do redistricting, they gerrymander the districts, which means they lean to one side or the other. So the Hip Hop Caucus is nonpartisan. So we don't care about Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, like that doesn't really matter. But it does matter if that district is heavily one way and it was drawn purposely for that reason, right? And so we're in that process right now. North Carolina actually just there was an article this morning in the paper that Mecklenburg County in particular, they're going to be doing redistricting, and they're going to have the maps out by September 30th. And a lot of places where they have community based or community style redistricting programs, you can be on that redistricting committee. So we need to be thinking about what it looks like to show up and represent ourselves and people like us on those redistricting committees to make sure that they aren't gerrymandering these districts. But even if they don't have that, they do have to have public comment, and you can go and talk and say this district is one-sided. This one doesn't really represent all the people. And so that's another way that we can get involved and be involved in this conversation. And it's really important because it determines who will be on that ballot for you to elect. So going to the polls is one piece. It's all the things that happen behind the scenes, like who are the candidates, who's actually showing, registering to be a candidate, who's supporting them. So, and another way, going back to the question you asked before about hip hop showing up, you see a lot of hip hop artists now who are trying to enter politics, right? Scarface running for mayor of Houston, Killer Mike, wanting to get into politics and running for mayor and having that conversation. Kanye pretending he was going to run for president, whether he was real or not. But
Right.
what you're seeing is we're getting involved and we're getting active, and we got to keep that momentum going. We got to keep that going.
I'm sorry for that. Two things that you brought up that I have a lived experience in. The first thing was is when I turned 18, it was in 2000 for the Bush Gore election, and I grew up in Miami, and I in school, you registered to vote while you're a senior in high school. So I got my voter registration. I was happy. I did the primary. I did the primary at a church, maybe a mile and a half from my house. When it came down to the general elections, when I went to that church, they said I wasn't registered to vote there.
Mm.
So about 2 hours, they said, we're going to make some calls to find out what's going on. When they called me back, they said that you have to go to Fort Lauderdale, which is about 45 minutes from Miami.
Wow.
And that was the first time I didn't hear voter suppression, but what I heard was they're trying to stop blacks from voting.
Yeah.
And I was not the only one who did the primary at that church who was turned away and sent to Fort Lauderdale. By the time they told me this, the polls were going to close within like an hour and a half. And it was right there. It was right during evening traffic. People, get off of work.
Yeah.
And I could not vote for the general elections in 2000.
Wow.
And that was and I remember I went to HBCU, Florida Memorial. It was Florida Memorial College, but now it's Florida Memorial University. And we marched to the polls. We did All Souls to the polls, and they shut the school down and they let us march to the polls, and I could not even vote.
Yeah.
And that was the worst feeling in the world.
And I don't think, and so again, I'm glad you said that. Like that, we don't have the conversation like in terms of voter suppression, but that's what you hear in the media. That's what you hear in political circles. They talk about voter suppression, but like you said, what really is that? And so I'm thinking, well, my vote isn't being suppressed. Ain't nobody. What it says to me is when I get to the poll, somebody saying no, you can't vote, and it's not no, you have to go somewhere else. It's no, you can't vote. Period. Right? Mm-hmm. So they're not saying no, you can't vote. Period. They're just making it extremely difficult for you to vote, which discourages people. So anything that's going to discourage us from getting to that poll and say we gonna give up, standing in long lines, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm tired, like all of that is suppression, right? Purging voter rolls. So another piece of that Senate Bill 1 that looks like it may actually pass in Texas is they'll be doing monthly citizenship checks. So basically they're just going to randomly check the rolls, pull some names, and just see if you're a citizen or not. And so that's just another way for them to purge voter rolls, right? So again, if I can get you off the voter rolls and you can't vote, that's or once you find that out, I'd make you jump through hoops to get your voting rights back. It becomes extremely difficult. And people give up. They're like, we already got a lot to do. I got to work. I got kids.
Right.
I'm hungry. So that's what voter suppression looks like, right?
It does.
And then voter ID laws. So having to have a voter ID. If you're like 90 years old, like my great aunt, before she passed, never had a license in her entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And so imagine if she, and I don't know if she had an ID or not. She might have, probably did, but let's assume that she didn't even have an ID, right? A state issued ID. And so without having that, and you were in a state where they require voter ID, and like she would be almost 100 today, she probably wouldn't know where her documents were to be able to go get that. So again, another way to keep us from showing up at the polls and being able to vote.
You spoke about redistricting, and it's so funny because here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, they have a redistricting committee, and a lot of people who were kind of on the fence with it said, okay, if we're going to have a redistricting committee, let the citizens be on that committee, right? So what they ended up doing was having four Democrats, four legislators, four Democrats, four Republicans, four civilian Democrats, and four civilian Republicans. And it was like, well, how is that? I'm not saying it's not bipartisan, but if you want to put it in the hands of the community, you want to put it in the hands of the residents, why would you need 8 legislators over it when they have a stake in it? They want to keep their districts as it is. They want to do this. So why even have them on it? So it kind of seemed like it was stacked up already with how they were doing it. So when you have situations like that, is redistricting, should we still advocate for redistricting? Because you had some legislators that did not want to redistrict. Then you had some that said, no, let's do it and put it in the hands of the people, and then this is what we end up getting.
So, I mean, that's actually, compared to some states, to have civilians on the redistricting committee is good. That's a step toward progress, right?
Okay, Virginia.
But that doesn't mean that that's the best situation. So I definitely get what you're saying. And I think that's the age old conversation around redistricting and redistricting committees, and how much involvement should the community have, how much should it be controlled by legislators. And then if you think about it, if I'm not affiliated with any party, especially the two major parties, then that throws me out of even being able to have a voice in that process if I have to register as a Democrat or a Republican to even be considered for this position. So I think there's still a long way to go. I think we need, and again, these are all very much state by state situations, county by county. And so that's another thing that you're starting to see. You're starting to see that the states are trying to take away a lot of the power of the local board of elections, and they're trying to have state-based rules for voting instead of having it different across counties, and especially for the counties where you see us showing up more. They really want to get control of them.
What is the Respect My Vote movement?
So Respect My Vote started in 2008, and it's one of the 4 ways that the Hip Hop Caucus organizes around political issues. So we have 4 platforms. Respect My Vote is our voting rights and democracy platform. And then we have our Think 100% platform, which includes our activism and films. So we have we do a lot of in our podcast, The Coolest Show, we do a lot of work around climate change, environmental justice, climate justice, because we believe climate justice is racial justice, and racial justice is climate justice, because Black and brown people are more impacted by climate than anybody else. If you think about when we have extreme heat, a lot of times we're living in places where we don't have air. Our seniors don't have air, or the air doesn't work. The same thing for heat and cold in the winter, or flooding and all of those things. And so if you just think about Hurricane Ida, and if you were anywhere from the Gulf Coast up throughout the eastern coast and got hit, and you don't have money to rebuild, or you living in a property, and let's say that the owner decides, hey, you know what, it's going to take a lot to rebuild this, I'm just not going to do it, and evicts you, renovates it, sells the property for profit. I mean, there's so many different things. From heat stress, we usually live in communities where there's more pollution, so we suffer from the impacts of the industrial things that are happening around us. So that's our Think 100% activism platform. And then we do Good Trouble, which we call hip hop's Department of Justice. And so that's where we do criminal and human rights, so work around death in custody, and criminal justice reform. And then finally, Justice Paid in Full is our economic justice platform, where we think about what it means for Blacks to have economic justice, and for our communities to divest from fossil fuels, and and start to really build up economics around our people. So,
I remember watching a documentary about where they would position a black neighborhood, a black community versus a white community. And I remember hearing about they would put the highways on the black side and the trains and things like that. And I grew up, again, I grew up in Miami, and the area that I grew up in was called the Bottom. It was Opalaka.
mm-hmm.
And in the Bottom, there was a train. We had one of the areas of it is called Railroad Drive, and the railroad goes right there in through my neighborhood. And we have the highway, the 826, right in State Road 9, right there. So it made me think about how they do position, because when you go to a white side, you don't see. I mean, we were a stone's throw from a canal in the back and the trains, the train tracks, and you would hear the train all night long in my area. So how can we combat? How does the Hip Hop Caucus aid in combating the effects of climate change in a Black community when we're already positioned in that community? Like, what can we do to combat it there?
One, educating ourselves. Again, understanding the impacts of climate justice. So I told you I had an interesting story around climate. So and I told you that part of my career has been in PR for government entities. So I was working for the garbage department here in the city of Charlotte. And this was in 2003. I'm sorry, 2003 or 2004.
Okay.
Anyway, I started to learn about the impact of landfills on the environment. So landfills are the third largest contributor to methane gas, greenhouse gas. And so greenhouse gas causes the ozone layer to break down, and it provides an opportunity for us to continue to heat up. So the more that we throw away, the more that we're creating greenhouse gas. And so we create, in the Black community, we throw everything away, right? Like, we use it till it can't be used no more, and then it's going in the garbage. So it was really about us thinking through how we manage waste differently, how we show up and we make better purchasing decisions and things like that. And so I'm pitching this story to Black media, and they're like, "Girl, Black people don't care about that. Don't nobody care about none of that." And fast forward probably less than a year and a half later, Katrina hit New Orleans, and we saw what that did to our people. And I had only one person that I literally reached out to called me back and say, "You know what, I should have listened to you. Climate change is a real thing. And even though we aren't talking about it, we should be talking about it." And, Black people would say they didn't care. They didn't care about the environment. They didn't like, and so, and I still hear that to this day. Like, we don't really understand the impact that it has on us. Everything from the reason that we have high rates of asthma, because we're in these communities where they didn't build the community around the highway. They put the highways through our communities. So if I don't know how many people, and if you haven't, you should go and watch Raising Canaan this season. I'm giving away some of the juice, but Canaan's mom is dating a guy that is an urban planning professor at NYU. And so he talks about how they built the Van Wyck Parkway so that white people who were trying to get to the airport wouldn't have to stop through Black communities. They wouldn't have to travel through Black communities. They were scared. So he was like, so if you notice, they only stop at the gas station to get gas, like that gas station. And so the Van Wyck is basically going through a Black community. They tour, the communities, and that was racist urban planning across America is what they did. And so that, leads to us being in communities where the highways are there, where there are train tracks. So all of that exhaust, all of that, the stuff in the air that's hurting us. When they build landfills, they put them in our area, or they build our communities in lower price housing, the things that we can afford near those things. So, if I wanted to buy a house, like there was during the housing boom in the early 2000s, when we went to buy a house, they were showing us properties. My ex-husband and I, they were showing us properties in neighborhoods. We were like, we ain't living over here. And I know you're only doing it because we're Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we told them, no, this is where we want to live. We don't want to live here. And it was honestly very expensive for us and out of our price range. But by the grace of God, we said, look, we're going to move where we want to live and get our kids in a better environment. And it was one of the best decisions that we made. I've since moved back into the city that it started to gentrify. And the thing is when you go into neighborhoods and gentrification starts to happen, you
Mm-hmm.
can't necessarily stop gentrification because you want to see dilapidated communities improve, but you don't. But the unintended impact of that is that property values are going to go up, and so you're going to end up displacing whoever's there if
Mm-hmm.
they can't afford to stay. So, but one way that we can do that is like we, as I want to say second generation Black Americans who have a little bit more money than our parents did. It's probably more generations than that. But anyway, my point is we have the opportunity to move back into those communities, right? We might not be able to stop the gentrification, but if we're going to spend the same amount to live in the suburbs, why not keep the integrity, the cultural integrity of the communities that we built and
Mm-hmm.
stay there and take advantage of all of the amenities that are starting to come to our communities? So you asked how we, help combat that. It's education. It's having these conversations. It's through our podcast. It's through doing interviews like this, going and having people on the ground to talk about it. Petrochemicals. You'll see a lot about petrochemicals coming from us in the next couple of months, as we start in response to a lot of the natural disasters and the climate change that's happening. These petrochemical facilities are usually located in Black and brown communities. The impact of it, like Cancer Alley in New Orleans, is called Cancer Alley because of the impact of that. Think about Aaron Brockovich and what
Okay.
came out of that. So it's that type of situation, but these are in Black and brown communities in the Gulf, in the Ohio River Valley, and in Houston, Texas. So again, they're building these facilities in communities that are close to us and giving us an opportunity to buy houses here because the land is not as valuable and they can make it affordable for us. But we suffer because now we have diseases and all kinds of things because we're living that close to it. And so it's just educating people and asking them, hey, work with us to divest from fossil fuels to get petrochemicals out of here. We have to start thinking about our communities and our health, and understanding how things actually work and why we are actually sick. We're not sick because we are just prone for disease. We're sick by design. Again, going back to Outkast's album and Big Rube saying disease engineering. It's being engineered for us to be this sick. We have to pay attention. And so that's our role, to be able to get that information out, educate people and educate them on how that climate change is real. Climate change impacts Black and brown communities more than anybody else. And for us to achieve true racial justice, we have to have climate justice. And for us to have racial justice, we have to have climate justice.
To go back to voting, Black people are not monolithic people, and I think we're all starting to learn that as time goes on. One of my questions on here is, and I'm not sure which one to do first, so I'm just going to pick one. Do Black voters, do we vote our interest by and large? Do we vote our interest, or are we just automatically loyal to a specific party? Because you find more Blacks who are Democrats than you would Republicans. So do we tend to just say, I'm not going to vote my interest, I'm just going to stay right here? Or do you think that we do vote our interest?
I don't think we vote our interest. Because I honestly don't think that we do enough work to find out who the candidates are, what the issues are. And again, we don't understand the climate piece of it. We don't understand redistricting, I find a lot of times, just even local politics, people assume that the mayor, and it's different across wherever you live, right? The mayor in Charlotte, North Carolina, is a figurehead. We have a weak mayor form of government. So our city manager makes all the rules and policies. So to put the weight and pressure that we try to put on our mayor, she's really a figurehead here. That's not the same in Atlanta, where Keisha Lance Bottom is the city administrator, right? And so you have to understand how your local politics work, and how the national politics work, and why, we should show up in midterm elections harder than we show up for presidential elections, because those people are the ones that are supporting, and like the president. There again, the president has only so many things that he can do by law. And so the laws and policies are actually created by the people that we send to represent us in Congress. So this year for 2022, we need to be at the polls like we were in 2020, because
True.
it's even more important. And there are local elections that are happening, and you're going to feel that even more. So your school boards, understanding where your school board funding comes from, what the school board actually does, what your county commission does. So I say, no, I don't think that we actually vote our interests, because I don't think we even understand how things work. And so even if we think we know we're voting our interests, we're not voting in the right way for the right people, for the right things.
We here we're actually having a big race here. We have the gubernatorial race with Democrat nominee Terry McAuliffe and Republican nominee Glenn Youngkin, and then we also have the entire House of Delegates. Every seat is up for grabs, and it is a circus. And I don't think this has ever. I'm not sure if it's ever happened that every single seat is up for grabs. So it made me kind of think about, a lot of, we're starting to see a lot more Black Republicans here in the Commonwealth of Virginia running for office. To be honest, they are not generating the funds that the incumbent or the Democrat nominee. So for instance, what I'm saying is you have some Republicans who are the incumbent, and their opponent, a Democrat, is outraising them now. You have some Democrats who are the incumbent, and they have their Republican opponent, and the Democrat is getting more money than them. But what I found fascinating was in a southern state, we see now about 10, I would say about a good 10 Black Republicans running. So I'm going to ask you, what makes us different? What makes the Black Republican different from the Black Democrat when we all have the same issues?
So again, the caucus is nonpartisan, so we don't really pay attention to Democrat or Republican.
Right.
And you said it yourself that that Black people aren't monolithic. So you're going to see that we have different perspectives and views on things. So you're going to have some people that are more liberal and progressive, and some that are more conservative and moderate. And so you'll choose where you're going based on that. So I guess the other thing that that I'd like to say about that is that, we would see a lot more of us voting our interest if we paid attention to what was on our agenda, and had an actual agenda, as opposed to voting for people, right? So we end up voting for candidates. I think, we see too that a lot of Black people vote for Black people. All skin folk ain't kin folk. And so we just gotta remember to vote by issues, and that's what we advocate for at the caucus. Vote your interests, vote your issues, figure out what's happening, and then determine where the candidates stand on the issues, and wherever it most aligns with where you stand, that's where you vote. And that could be, you could have, some very conservative ideas about certain things, and then get very liberal and progressive on something else. So it really is about where you stand. So pay attention to the issues. And pay attention to where the people on the ballot are on those issues and where you are, and vote based on your alignment with, because again, these are people that are representing you. So it's like, if I can't go, this is my proxy. I can't be in there, but this person thinks like me, and so I want them to be the one representing me. So if I gotta have a proxy, that's who I want. And as my good sis Teslin Figaro says,
Love her.
love her too. If you don't see somebody that you align with on the ballot, then maybe it's time for you to find somebody or be somebody.
That's an option. So let me ask you this. Do you think that Black people are undercover conservatives? And this is the reason why I ask, is I did a survey, a poll kind of, you know how they ask you different questions to see where you are, and they say, do you agree with this, or would you do that, or this and that?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of it, it had me down as a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, this can't be right, because I feel that I'm more progressive and more liberal. But based on the answers that I gave on that survey, it had me down as conservative. Do you think that Black people, I guess behind closed doors, are more conservative than what we either admit to, or we're just not what we think we are?
I don't think that, again, Black people are a monolithic people. So I don't think that there's a generalization that we can put on them. I think that we all assume that we align with Democrats, but that's not necessarily true. And it is it's honestly, talking politics is one of the taboo things to do. And so people generally don't necessarily show up. They show up how they think they need to show up in that room. So I guess, what I'm trying to say is that's a possibility, right? That we are actually more conservative than we think. But then I also think there's, for me, because and everybody that knows me knows that I think that my tagline should be because slavery, because I think we suffer so much today in a lot of ways from things that happened during slavery, and we don't even realize it. So I think, in what you just asked about, I think we might be more conservative than we realize, because we've been oppressed for so long. We've been taught how to, to believe and to follow and to do as we're told. And so if you hear things so many times, we start to believe it, or we're conditioned to follow the crowd, right? So and then we become a lot more conservative and repressed, because we don't have the privilege that white people do, right? So imagine the audacity of thinking that you could do X, Y, and Z. So we then say, oh, no, you could never do that. And that's a conservative viewpoint, potentially. So I think, because of slavery, you could definitely make an argument for that. But I also think that you're going to find that, people don't always show up as their authentic self when they have conversations about politics. So you could be, living as a conservative and not even know it. But again, conservative or liberal, it's what matters to you.
Right.
Where do you stand? What's going to make you happy? And showing up to the polls to vote for your proxy, the person that's going to take you where you want to go and represent your interests.
I know that this past week, 3 weeks, our school boards here in Virginia have been voting for what they call the transgender policy for students, which allows, for the most part, is really just to add protections for the transgender students that schools have. So, anti-bullying, anti-harassment. There's a small piece about using the restrooms, and there's this big controversy behind the bathrooms in sports. And those are two things that you talk about. And I went on a rant on Facebook Live, and my position was, these are children. So it's not for us it's not my child's not transgender. So it's not for me to say who can get bullied and who can't. I have a child with special needs. He gets bullied. He used to get bullied because of people seeing him as different. So when it comes to any child, I vehemently believe if there is a policy out there to prevent from them being bullied, in my opinion, pass it. Because you're talking about bullying, and now kids are committing suicide more. And what I saw, because of course they take the school board meetings, a lot of Blacks getting up saying, I'm a Christian, I don't believe in this, so therefore please don't vote in this way. And I was astonished, but in the wrong way. Because one thing I said was, for us to be the most discriminated people on this planet, some of us had the gall to stand there and say, discriminate against these children. But I did see it, and it came from us. And I just could not believe that we would think like that. And a lot of them cited their Christian values just for that one thing. And one thing that I kept saying on my live was, and it was particular in this particular city. I'm not gonna say the city's name, but it was a specific city here in Virginia, because my county voted for the protections. Each school does what they want to do as far as the bathrooms go. So you have some schools that's building their own bathrooms for transgender students. Then you have some schools that say, well, we only have maybe 3 or 4, and they're comfortable using the nurse's bathroom or the faculty bathroom, but we're still going to have things in place. But I was saying, if you're going to cite your religious beliefs for this, then you need to cite your religious beliefs for everything else that goes on in that city. There shouldn't be any fornicating in that city. There shouldn't be any covet thy neighbor's wife. There should not be any stealing, killing, lying, anything. That city should be like Mayberry. And I was just astonished that we got up there and just spoke out like, no, don't give them protections. I don't want them in the bathrooms with my child. Or some of the Blacks would get up there and say, this means that a grown man can go into a bathroom with a little girl. And I was just like, first of all, no. You're going to have perversion everywhere you go. But I use the example that I use men's bathrooms when I don't feel like standing in a woman's line. And so if you're gonna cite that, then all of us have to be labeled perverts. Because there have been times where I'll be in the airport and that lady's line is out wrapped around and you see nobody in the men's, and I say, I want men's. Or I know men who like women's bathrooms because they say it's cleaner, it has magazines and chairs.
And stalls. Yeah, they don't have the stalls.
I work with men who say, if the building's kind of empty or whatever, and they have to use the restroom, I'm just going to the women's bathroom because it smells better. So if you're going to call children perverts, then you need to call us. And I'm saying that to say that our viewpoints were so different at that time, but we have the same experience. We get discriminated against, but yet we don't mind doing it to another person, a child.
Yeah. And again, we're not monolithic people, and I think we're not perfect people. I think in that instance, human nature comes in, right? And so people will on certain issues show up more religious than others. And that's what I was talking about. Like, I may be really conservative about this one thing and really liberal about the other thing, for whatever reason. And the thing that I'm liberal about may go against the thing that I decided that I use as a reason. In this case, you're talking about Christianity. So I may turn a blind eye to something that the Bible says is wrong in this one situation, but then be really adamant about this. So, I mean, again, we're not monolithic people, but we all have the right to have our views, and we got to find the people that will serve as our proxy for those things that are important to us.
Last question. In the 70s during the Black Power, the 60s, 70s during Black Power movement, and even to the 80s, I believe, we started to hear about Black people starting their own political party. And then I remember last year, year before last, P. Diddy, he did a live or he did a video saying that Black people should have our own political party. Do you think that Blacks should have our own political party? And what do you think will happen if we were to band together and make our own party?
So again, that would be creating based on skin color. And we just talked about all Black people aren't the same. Skin folk, all skin folk ain't kin folk. So I think it has to be more than just race, which is a made up social construct. It needs to be more around our culture. So could hip hop have a political party? Absolutely. Do we have a set of core values? And so I think it would take us to really think about what those core values are for us that would make up this political party. I'm not against anybody or us having as many choices as it's going to take to represent the people, because everybody needs to be represented. So if we don't feel like we're being represented in either one of the major parties, or even the libertarian or whatever, yeah, let's do it, whatever that's going to take. And I think it'll take us kind of thinking about what the basis is for our connection, what the thing is, the ideology that's bringing us all together. And you'll still have some, because every Republican in white and every Democrat in black. So you just, so that it's the same thing for whatever political party that would happen. So, I'm all here for it. Let's start a hip hop political party and see if we can get some people, in office that represent the hip hop culture and represent the hip hop people, and everybody that supports freedom of of speech, movement, justice, and true justice. So I'm here for it. And I know you said that was the last question, so I wanted to say,
I actually have some more. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. You had mentioned Virginia election. We are actually starting next weekend, September 11th. We'll be doing a tour throughout Virginia for the election. So we'll be doing voter registration and get out the vote rallies from September 11th to October 28th. I'll send you the information for that. But the first one is at Mosaic Steel. It's in Hampton, and it's going to be September 11th, and it's in partnership with Hot 91, Freshtopia, and Freshtopia Radio.
Okay. Yes. As a matter of fact, when the show is over, don't click off, because I want to talk to you offline.
Okay.
But where do you see hip hop going from 2021? We saw where it was in 1979 to 2021. Where do you see it?
I see us taking back our power, right? You see a lot of hip hop artists now going independent, using social media to build their following. They don't need the record labels. The record labels need them. So I see us taking control of our culture. Again, it has become extremely commercialized. And so I see us going back to where we were, to using hip hop for exactly what it was founded to do, to get the message out to the people, to share who we are, what we are, and to help create change. So I just see it going up from here.
How can people get involved? So Hip Hop Caucus is nationwide, correct?
Mm-hmm.
For the one specifically in Virginia, because we have the elections this year, and as you mentioned, 2022, the Senate is up, and I believe the Congress too. I'm talking state Senate and U.S. Congress. How can we get involved with Hip Hop Caucus here in the Commonwealth of Virginia?
So you would go to hiphopcaucus.org. And there's a place for you to sign up to be a part of to be a part of the movement. And once you sign up, it kind of segregates you based on state. And so as we have opportunities, events, and things that come up, you'll be on that list for things that are happening specifically in Virginia. But you will also get the information from a national perspective. So one of the, around voting rights, one of the things that we're organizing with other voting rights organizations on is to pass the For the People Act. We hadn't talked about that, but the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights, Voting Rights Act, and I'm missing Advancement Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Both of those are to help us with these voter suppression issues, right? So for the People Act, it's a federal legislation that would actually squash all of these voter suppression bills that are happening in states, and it would provide a federal protection and federal rules for how elections and access to the ballot should happen. So I would encourage everybody to go look up For the People Act. It actually went up to vote in late June to the Senate, and it did not make it to the floor. So basically, the filibuster has been used for years to keep Black people from accessing the ballot. So if you watch, I watch a lot of TV. If you watch Godfather of Harlem, they actually, this last episode talked about the filibuster and the role it played in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 65, I can't remember what year it was. But either way, the filibuster has traditionally been used to keep us out. So what that filibuster looks like is basically you have to have 60 votes to move a bill to the Senate floor. 60 votes from, senators. So 60 senators. And so right now, so depending on, what that looks like. So right now, our Senate is split 50-50, 50 Republican, 50 Democrat. So all 50 Democrats voted for it. We didn't get a single Republican vote. We needed at least 10 to get it to the floor to even be voted on.
Wow.
So in the House of Representatives, it voted and passed, but it has to pass both houses,
right,
both chambers, before it can become law. Well, we can't seem to get it to the Senate floor for even a vote because of the filibuster. And so right now we're asking people to urge their senators to support the For the People Act. Don't assume that just because they were Democrat and they supported it before, they're going to support it again, right? All kinds of deals go on behind the scenes, because if I really want something more than this, then I might trade off my vote for this, whatever it looks like. So Congress goes back full time Monday, September 13th, and we are pushing hard to tell them to pass the For the People Act. And it's so important that it happens before this 2022 midterm, because if not, these voting restriction laws that are in place right now will be how we live in 2022 voting, right? So no drive-through voting, limited access to the poll because of early voting, and the mail-in voting. And like some states, they're now going to require you to have a documented medical reason to even get an absentee ballot. So all of those things are extremely important. And so the For the People Act will help us with that. And the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act goes back to in 2013, when the Supreme Court stripped some of the protections from the Civil Rights Act. And so it's putting those protections back in place that basically says if states have violated or have been shown to be discriminatory in elections, that they have to go and get any changes that they want to make. They have to get those approved by a board before they can make changes. So like if I want to limit voting access and reduce the number of voter registration hours, I have to go and get approval to do that before I can do it. And so they strip that protection, which means now these states can make changes if they want to, and they have no check on it. And so that the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act will put that protection back in place. And another thing, DC is like 98% Black, and it's still not a state. So they don't have any representation in Congress. And so we're trying to, push for DC statehood as well.
So we are about done. Tell everybody where they can follow you, or where they can contact you in case they had any additional questions for you.
So I am, although I should be more active on Twitter, I'm not, but I do have Twitter. So Twitter and Instagram is at BEA Williams APR. Apple Paul Roberts. So that's BBEA Williams APR. And you can always follow at Hip Hop Caucus. And I encourage you all to follow at Hip Hop Caucus. There, that's another way to get connected with us. We put opportunities for engaging there as well.
Do you have a Facebook or IG that can follow you, or your Metso?
So everything for Hip Hop Caucus is at Hip Hop Caucus. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And for me, it's at B Williams APR. And for SoulMed, it's at soulmed.co. So SOULMED.co, at soulmed.co.
You've heard it. Thank you, Ms. Williams, for joining me. You had a wealth of knowledge, and we covered a lot of bases, and I thank you. Early voting starts September 17th here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. You heard her. You shouldn't have any questions. Ms. Brandy Williams gave us the blueprint, gave us the answers, gave us the questions, gave us the issues. She gave us the explanations. So you should not have any questions when it comes to early voting. So Commonwealth of Virginia, again, early voting starts September 17th up until November the 2nd. So I encourage all of you, black, white, green, or purple, to get out there and vote, and especially our Black brothers and sisters, regardless of what party you represent. Our ancestors fought, died, bitten by dogs, had water hoses put on them, given literacy tests, and everything in between, so that we can have the privilege and the liberty to get out there and exercise our political rights and find our proxy and vote. Thank you again, Ms. Williams. I really appreciate you coming. And that is it for us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at UnPolitical Politics. Make sure to follow the IG page at UnPolitical Politics. Make sure to follow the Facebook page at UPP Cousin Niki. Make sure to, if your soul calls for it, to donate to the Cash App at the $ UnPolitical Politics, and to the Venmo at Cousin Niki. Thank you so much.